Welcome to How Can I Keep From Singing, where we explore the power of singing together. My name is Stuart Stotts, coming to you from rural Wisconsin, and my guests today are Bonnie Lockhart and Nancy Schimmel.
We need to wake up. We need to wise up. We need to open our eyes and do it now, now, now. We need to build a better future, and we need to start right now.
Bonnie Lockhart is a singer and songwriter rooted in Oakland, California. She's been bringing song to social movements from the Vietnam era to the women's movement to Occupy and in the current mobilizations for people over billionaires. She enjoys the transformative power of communal singing with children and grown-ups alike. Nancy Schimmel has been singing and leading singing since 1960s peace marches and rallies. With Bonnie and others, she started Occupella in 2011 and wrote a book, Occupella, Singing in the Lifeboats, about their experiences singing at occupies, at demonstrations, at rapid transit stations, and banks. She loves writing parodies, political and non-political. She has a button that says, "Fun is my spiritual path." I should add that I've known them both for many years and have deep respect for them as musicians, activists, and just plain human beings. Welcome, Bonnie and Nancy, to How Can I Keep From Singing?
Thank you.
Let's start with Occupella. Nancy, you wrote a book by that name. I know your involvement goes before and after that time. Both of you, tell me what kinds of things you did in Occupella. And I love the name, by the way.
The name just came out of somebody that we're making a bunch of jokes about Occupy and pies and all sorts of things. And somebody said, who was another singer, said Occupella, and it stuck because we knew we needed to bring music to that movement. And it was perfect because people were rooted in a place.
I love the name. And so what kinds of things did you do?
Well, Bonnie started it out really with proposing a song circle at one at Occupy Oakland and one at Occupy Berkeley, and doing it once a week.
It fed on relationships that had been developed over decades before that, and not the least the Children's Music Network, which Nancy and I and Betsy Rose were all a part of. There were a bunch of fellow travelers in Freedom Song Network, which came out of People's Music Network. So there was all that history. When the opportunity came to bring song to this burgeoning movement, we knew what to do and we knew who to ask to do it.
So you had a long history of singing for social justice and in public sorts of events. If we look historically, how has that evolved? You were singing back in the 60s. What do you notice that's different now or over the last 10 years from, 50 years ago or so?
Well, I sure don't remember the words as well as I used to. But luckily, a lot of these songs we sing are zippers and repetitive, so that helps a lot.
And those were always the kind of song that people sang, and parodies.
Do you think that people were more used to singing together back then in these kinds of events?
When I was a kid, I heard people singing political songs, and especially union songs, at meetings, at fundraising events, at parties, but not on the street unless there was a strike and there was a picket line. But I didn't hear people just out there singing until the 60s.
But comparing the 60s to, 2010 or, that kind of time, what would you say about people's willingness or familiarity with singing together in political events?
To me, there was clearly a shared culture, and it didn't include everybody, but there was a shared culture around folk music, which was a participatory music. And so, when I was in my 20s, I could go to somewhere out of town or in town and go to somebody's living room or bedroom, and there would be 10 people who knew 10 songs in common. I don't find that to be true up until Occupy in this millennium. I really felt the loss of that kind of shared culture, and I thought this is weird in the history of human beings that 10 people who live in the same neighborhood to get together and they don't know 10 songs or even one in common that they could actually lead or sing. But I'm finding now, to my great thrill that people are hungry to sing together. I'm really finding that now, and that we don't have this shared repertoire. But Nancy and I had the experience of going to a picket line and singing "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around," and a young person came up and went like, "Wow, that's a great song. Did you write it?" And we were, well, yeah, I would love to claim it, but it has a history in the civil rights movement, and that person didn't know it, but they sang along because it was easy to sing.
Yeah, I think this question of shared repertoire is a big one. That we did have more of a shared repertoire, in the past. But that's also where things like zipper songs make singing together possible, because once you know one part of the song, you know the whole song, and then you can just change another thing. So I know that zipper songs are such a constant when it comes to political singing. In rallies and so on, to break it broadly down, sort of two kinds of situations. One is where there's the microphone and you have the speaker and they want a singer in there and you go in to do a couple songs and you have a crowd out in front of you. The other is, which I've noticed like at the No Kings events that I've been at, people are along the street. They're not all gathered in one place. Singing is very different between one situation and the other. Is that something you found or that you could talk about?
I guess the first No Kings rally I went to, there was a drum circle, and we sort of fell in with that and then did some singing. There wasn't a singing group that coalesced, even just, from people who could sing. We were all stretched out along a street. We weren't in a group. On the other hand, when you're in a group and you have an idiot running the thing, they put you at the beginning and then they have 67 speeches. And then they put you at the end when people are tired of all this and they don't have the songs in between that use a different part of their brain and make the meeting go better. The only time we were in a rally where there was a song between each speaker, I found out later that the woman who organized it was a dancer. So she understood then and now. A lot of organizers don't get it.
I know I've been part of that same challenge for 40 years. First of all, the singers are the first to be cut when things run late, which inevitably they do. And they don't understand the need of changing energy and the power of song to galvanize people when they've listened to someone who's not always inspiring, shall we say. Talk a little bit about singing in these unusual situations, that banks and BART stations and things like that. What was behind that, and how did it go?
That brings to mind the kind of spontaneousness of the Occupy movement, how singers and artists and street painters and clowns and all kinds of people just showed up and spontaneously. There was a lot of that. And so, Betsy wrote a song, Take Me Out of the Big Banks, which was a parody of Take Me Out to the Ball Game, which was really fun. And we went to some banks that were being targeted for their investments in fossil fuels and other crimes. And it was just really fun. It has the thrill of transgressiveness, which I'm more cautious about than I was when I was 20. But I think it's really fun to find things that seem really productive, that have that thrill. So I enjoyed singing in banks a couple of times with that.
You're listening to How Can I Keep From Singing? My name is Stuart Stotts, and my guests today are Bonnie Lockhart and Nancy Schimmel. Nancy, I think you had we talked about a piece from your book that Betsy Rose had written. I don't know if this would be a time to kind of set that up and share that.
Right. Well, I wasn't there and she was reporting it, and then I was able to put it in the book. It was in San Francisco, and the police had moved Occupy out of a street, and then Occupy had come back into that street a little farther down, a different day. The police were lined up, and there was some tension in the situation. And she was talking about being worried. Were we going to be able to be nonviolent? Were the police going to try to corral us, or whatever police tend to do? I just want to read because she put it so well. But as we sing, we feel the strength of ourselves and each other. We feel the power of the deep roots of these songs, sung through so many movements that changed our society over the last century or more. And there's a palpable shift in the crowd. Plus, I feel that the police are subtly calmed and reassured by our singing. A crowd that is singing positive, hopeful songs isn't likely to also be throwing bottles, yelling angry taunts, or breaking windows. Singing takes all that energy, anger, fear, hope, and determination and gives it a focus with breath and heart behind it.
I do love that, and I think it captures so much of what we're talking about. What about the logistics? In your book, Nancy, you talk a little bit about Bonnie coming with song lyrics where the downbeat was underlined, just to get people all starting in the same time, especially in a parody and those kinds of things. Are there other things that facilitate a more successful experience out in public and an event or things like that?
One way that we were really lucky was that we were going to the same weekly demonstration for 5 years. And that was Tax the Rich. It was in front of a theater that had been closed, so there was just a sort of place on the sidewalk where we weren't in the way of any store or anything. And some of the same people would show up, some different people. 2 or 4 of us were there every time. It was totally a part of that demonstration, the singing. Could try out songs there. We kept rearranging the songbook, which is why we never published it. We have it online because we want to keep changing the songs. The other thing was, I don't know, somebody, I think maybe it was Bonnie, said we ought to start having meetings because for a while we were just doing it and we weren't meeting. And, all of us have been to enough committee meetings to last for a very long lifetime. But we started meeting and Bonnie brought the agenda, which none of us had thought of. And we had a meal first, we had potluck, and so we could catch up with each other, and it wasn't quite as meeting-y. But it did help us to do things like figure out how to do what word to underline in that song, because we didn't even necessarily agree. But we'd work it out in the meetings and then have the equipment when we got there.
I think one of the things that's changed in terms of the nuts and bolts is a way to get around for us, the age-old problem of song sheets. I like song sheets because it really not only gives people the words, but it gives people a message. Yes, we definitely want you to sing. This is not a performance. I like having every way possible to give people that message. You inevitably print up 50 song sheets when 5 people show up, and 500 when, and 5 when 500 show up, and stuff like that. Now I don't know, I noticed that some demonstrations people had QR codes in order to get their leaflets out, and I thought, oh, we'll just do that. And so we've been doing that at all the No Kings and sort of this new era of mass singing. It works most of the time because most people are willing to find the lyrics on their phones. I don't love people singing looking at their phones, but I never like people singing looking at their song sheets either. I love looking at people's faces when we sing. But, throwing in enough zippers that we don't even put on the song sheets gets people's eyes up, and that business of wondering what to do with, 25 recycled song sheets. It's not going to be the same song the next time we sing. It just cuts down on work and makes it feel like we brought the right thing. What
a great technological adaptation. A QR code.
Yeah.
Repertoire. You've got songs that go way back to the civil rights movement or so on. You have songs that are being created. You have parodies, which I know you both have written your share of. Parodies bring the familiar melody to people. Again, there's always a balance in, I think, what you're doing where you are performing at a certain level, And yet at the same time, you want people to sing along. And sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. Talk a little bit about this repertoire. It's clearly developed in this living laboratory of meetings and ongoing relationships that songs are shifting and changing. What else would you have to say about repertoire for people who might want to be doing something similar to what you're doing?
I'm on our website.
I'll put that in the notes where your website is so people can go there and get all the songs.
Right. You know, one song that's come up for me that feels really like it encapsulates what we're trying to do right now, and that is Holly Near's We Are a Gentle, Angry People, and we are singing for our lives. You know, that whole verse just says where we are right now, even though it was written in 1978 when Harvey Milk was assassinated in San Francisco. So it was for a very different situation, very different time. It really works now. And we can, put new verses to it. It works as a zipper.
It is a great song, and I've done that song many times myself. And it relates to this idea, the subtitle of your book, Nancy, Singing in the Lifeboats. That here we are out on the ocean facing grave dangers and yet singing at the same time.
One of my favorite kinds of song is sea shanties, and they're work songs. And this is our work, and these are our work songs.
It's a great way to put it. This is our work. And they do have that rhythmic sort of quality that carries people along. I have a harder time singing something that's sort of soft and flowy when you're in a rally sort of situation. You want to get the energy going.
Yeah, and when it comes to repertoire, to me, the first thing that comes up, I used to kind of joke about being a musician. I'm just in it for the relationships, because the relationships that I have with musicians and people who are devoted to music are so precious. And that's where, when I think of where does my repertoire come from and where does the repertoire that I want to perform and lead others in, it comes from the relationships with people who are devoted to this, in many cases, in all cases, are very talented and creative and imaginative. And I think, organizations that we have all shared in Children's Music Network, like the Freedom Song Network, like Occupella allowed us to, in some ways, become, are the places where those relationships develop with other musicians who are writing, who are rewriting, and who are singing, so that we hear you hear a good song from someone that you know. And always impresses me more than hearing a good song on YouTube. I've neglected some good songs on YouTube that people send to me, because that human connection is what makes me really wake up and go like, oh, pay attention. This is a song you want to learn.
I can still remember being at a Freedom Song Network meeting in San Francisco years ago, and someone was being annoying, as someone often is at a meeting. And I just thought to myself, yeah, but these are my people.
It's the beloved community, which includes people being annoying. What about the next generations? We all come from a time when singing, the civil rights movement in particular, is so connected to the idea of singing together, then into the Vietnam War movement, or anti-Vietnam War movement. What do you experience out there on the streets with people who are 25 in relating to singing?
Yeah, there's a genre, I'd call it, of music that has really caught on with young people here, and my sense is it's throughout the nation, if not further. That is a certain kind of singing. I relate it to the Peace Poets and Lou Aya, creating a kind of chant music. It's usually very short and repetitive. It's connected to spiritual communities often, but it has attracted a lot of people who sing together and have various, a lot of the connections are on various apps like WhatsApp and stuff like that. But it's really remarkable how those communities are developing repertoires, and some people within them are taking it more into the street, taking it more into social change than others. But it has that connection, and I find it encouraging.
It is true also, as you're saying that, Bonnie, I think about the sort of chants that people do as they're marching down the street. The people united will never be defeated, and whose house, our house. That was the big one in Wisconsin. Those kinds of things, which are like singing together. They may not quite have the same melody, but it has the same purpose of bringing people together around shared words.
Yeah, and I think that also, as we understand what it means to be a multicultural country, that the roots of the folk music that the four of us on this screen share are have limits in terms of what resonance they have for people. And so drum circles, different kinds of music where rhythm, batucadas, different kinds of marching bands that are rhythm, oriented, rhythm rooted, are part of what the music of a social justice sounds like now. And that's a good thing to me. And it's always been interesting how participatory music makes a beautiful cultural weaving, sometimes a very difficult one, but that's part of what I think is happening now too.
I can certainly imagine that is true, that there is a widening of the type of song that can work to bring people together around a shared political agenda, rather than just sort of rehashing the 60s or, those kinds of songs, going back to those. You're going to a rally, and you don't really know what's going to be there. And you've been asked to sing a song or to lead a song. I kind of keep it open-ended. What are 2 or 3 songs that you kind of have in your pocket? You may or may not use them, but that you have a pretty strong history and confidence in, that will work to get people singing along with you.
Yeah, my go-to right now is Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, because it's kind of pissed off. And I think that has always been an inspiration for me. And it's also beautiful, and it has a wonderful history. So it's my first go-to in the situation that you kind of sketch out there. Another one that I'm liking a lot now is not that well known, but it was written by a woman named Ellie Grace. And it was started out No Wall, No Ban. And we've revised it to No Raid, No Ban, because this iteration of the Orange Man is more about raids than walls. But it's just very simple. It's on YouTube if anyone hears this and wants to learn it. It's under No Wall, No Ban. She sings it a cappella, which I really like. It's rhythmic, and it speaks to the immigration issue that is so awful. and I think that's a really good song. And I also want to imagine one that comes to mind right away when I asked to sing is Woody Guthrie's All You Fascists Bound to Lose. It's really fun to sing that. And that again it's on YouTube. And I find that people really want to sing that.
How come we have to be singing that 80 years later?
Oh my God.
I know.
I want to thank you both so much for talking with me today about this really wonderful aspect of people singing together with a purpose. Not that just singing together isn't enough, but singing together for a greater vision or some larger idea is also a very powerful tool in social change. Thank you very much for talking with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure as always.
You've been listening to How Can I Keep From Singing? A production of Common Arts. My name is Stuart Stotts, and my guests today were Bonnie Lockhart and Nancy Schimmel.